Yugioh is dying. Perhaps at this point you have become accustomed to this verbose, elongated explanation as to why Yugioh is once again hurtling towards its own demise. Over the last few months, with things such as poorly performing products and the bizarre decision Konami has made to essentially nuke classic Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's no wonder that we are once again having this discussion as to why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is again in its death throes. This time, the problem is Master Duel.
And as I ruminate on what that thing is and why it might matter, I find myself coming to the same conclusion over and over and over again. Master Duel is destroying the TCG. In a myriad of ways, through a myriad of forms, the continued success of Yu-Gi-Oh's online component is coming at the active detriment of paper play.
When I first watched through this video, I kind of took it at face value, a sort of well-structured and presented rant that kind of organizes shower thoughts of some of the passing frustrations of someone who primarily plays the TCG. With personal anecdotes littered throughout, it kind of felt more like a love letter to the TCG and all of its positives and great things Yu-Gi-Oh! Has done for all of our lives on a personal and community level. However, there are some things brought up which feel very misleading and in some cases incorrect. Before looking at some of the points here, I just want to clarify something and of course, naturally set out a bit of a disclaimer as someone tries to give an opinion on the internet. This is not drama. This is not a haha gotcha moment. This is just a healthy discussion that I want to have in the form of a consolidated, structured response video. And about a topic that ultimately myself, MBT, and all of you watching most likely really care about: the health and growth and sustainability of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. We want success for the game at all levels, from the humble local basement to the big esport fancy arenas. We want the game to be accessible and to grow symbiotically and in tandem with one another, not in spite of one another. And if that's not what you want to see from the game, then this video is not for you.
The WCQ was huge. 2,800 people showed up, each sporting an invitation hard-won from another huge tournament. This puts it on pace with one of the biggest WCQs of all time, but I couldn't help but feel small. Unlike other WCQs, to me, this one felt like the 2,800 people in this room were the last people playing the TCG on the planet. Over the past few years, I've watched almost all of my friends, lifelong Yugists, and a significant number of my colleagues on YouTube stop playing the TCG altogether.
Now, I really don't want to approach this from the perspective of some sort of epic Reddit debate lord. So I'm only really trying to bring the stats into this just as a way to elucidate more objective realities that I think are at play here. First and foremost, it absolutely sucks to see the people around you quit the game. Those feelings should never be invalidated. Best friends, colleagues, people that brought you into the game, people you learned how to play with and even went to your first major tournaments alongside and potentially formed lifelong connections with.
Nice noodle legs, buddy.
Nice fucking small fucking rabbit cock.
But the matter of fact here is that Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG has been doing better than it's ever been. Over the course of the last 6 years of data, we can see that YCS attendance across both regions, North America and Europe, haven't exactly skyrocketed, but they are on a somewhat modest upward trajectory. 2025 so far, for example, has seen the second highest attendance of Yu-Gi-Oh! YCSs ever, only a couple hundred off of the absolute peak attendance in Europe, which regularly pulls in 2,500 plus players. While 2024 did take a dip in attendance across both regions, the game has by and large been doing well and has been pulling in huge numbers for its events. And again, it's important not to invalidate anyone's personal experiences with these anecdotes. I myself have seen so many friends of mine quit the game and move on for greener pastures, and ultimately the real thread that connected us with Yu-Gi-Oh! We just don't see each other anymore. It fucking sucks. But I do think it is important to look at the overall here, especially when you're willing to present such a bold hypothesis as Master Duel is actively detrimental to the TCG and is killing it. That is a very bold statement to make. This WCQ, the National Championship of North America, was the second biggest NAWCQ of all time. In 2023, there were 3,000 participants. 24 saw 2,600. Don't forget that you need an invite to even enter this tournament. An invite which can only be obtained at the local and regional level across the entire continent, meaning that people are actively playing the game in their droves. And you aren't the last bastion of players at the event, even though potentially it might have felt that way for other extrinsic reasons. The entirety of the NAWCQ livestream for this year, for example, is sitting at collectively over 500,000 views. There is plenty of TCG interest and hype. There is another continent as well, by the way. The WCQ in Europe in 2024 was the biggest EU WCQ of all time, and that was the year of fire. Maybe one of the worst formats we've ever had, and still record-breaking numbers are being made.
The final nail in the coffin for pay-per-play came earlier today. Epic Games, along with some other Yu-Gi-Oh! Distributors, revealed they had received guidance requiring them to phase out Time Wizard at the regional level to be replaced with Time Trial, an anachronistic format that basically amounts to a fucked-up mix between the TCG and OCG ban lists at a specific point in time, with every card that's received an errata having that errata, and Master Rule 5. This change was attempted once already, and received such severe backlash from the community that Konami was pressured into reversing. But that reversal was very specific, and intentionally left the door open to do literally exactly this. Why are they changing Time Wizard, a grassroots development by the community that's brought thousands of lapsed Yugists back into the fold? Well, because you can't play it in Master Duel.
For some reason at some point, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community has just collectively decided that the reason that these Edison Time Wizard changes have been implemented is because of Master Duel. Master Duel Time Trials. The 3-day event that we had maybe like 3 times last year with respect to specifically Time Wizard formats. The one where you had to just win 3 games and you got 1 pack. This is the reason why Konami have decided to ruin classic Yu-Gi-Oh! This is frankly nothing more than a massive reach and assumption. And quite frankly, a huge scapegoat. Again, to reiterate, there is another continent on the planet. Konami EU made a public statement saying that Time Wizard events at the EU WCQ will indeed be with the old card text and the old game rules, and all it says is we will keep an eye on this in the future. This whole Edison drama for now is very specifically a Konami North America issue. Why is Europe not implementing these changes? Now, just to be very clear, I cannot definitively say to you and prove to you that this so-called TCG to Master Duel pipeline for why Master Duel is changing Time Wizard format and TCG is an incorrect and wrong hypothesis. I can't prove that to you. There is a chance that this could be true. In my opinion, I think it's far-fetched. So let me give you my personal opinion and view as to why this change occurred in, again, to reiterate, very specifically, North America and not the whole Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG region. Little Timmy goes to enter a side event at a YCS having heard all of the hubbub and hype around Edison. The golden age of Yu-Gi-Oh! When all you had was Call of Duty Modern Warfare double XP weekends, pizza, free time, and 5Ds. Bird! This is the greatest format ever! They sit down to duel against a 32-year-old balding millennial who's probably still playing the same deck he was 10 years ago in Modern and isn't interested in these meta sheeps, and proceeds to scold Little Timmy for not understanding priority, for not realizing that Raikou targets, and that the future fusion he drops on Little Timmy does indeed mill immediately, despite the fact Timmy's TCG Cyber Dragon deck, which runs future fusion, doesn't work that way, even though the card says so. The constant judge calls, the elitism of the older Edison players, the arguments every single event about how a card interacts or doesn't interact, without any real way to prove it except he said, she said, because there is no official unified source on these rules. Konami NA decided that enough was enough. Let's just use the most modern rules and card text and stick with that and keep the consistency, so that basically our judges don't have to suffer harassment at every event. This, in my personal opinion, is a more logical explanation in theory as to why this change is unfolding in NA. I'm not saying I like this. I'm not saying I agree with this, by the way, just to be clear. This theory, for me personally, makes more sense as to why Master Duel is changing over trying to emulate a format that happens 9 days in a calendar year. Both of these are just theories. You can decide for yourself which one makes the most sense to you, because Konami doesn't talk to us and communicate this stuff when they should. This is a point that I will concede. Master Duel is killing the TCG YouTube content. Perhaps a better way to describe it would be resetting it. Master Duel dwarfs TCG content on YouTube, whether that be competitive content, solo, group, all forms of Master Duel videos just tend to do better than the TCG. Well, that's just because Master Duel is a superior, better game, right? It's not that simple. This is kind of a chicken before the egg kind of paradox here. When Master Duel was released in 2022, naturally, every content creator on the platform was going to pivot towards and embrace Master Duel, with an influx of tens of thousands of new viewers, both short and long-term subscribers. All of the big household name content creators you've come to know and love focus their energy on Master Duel. And why wouldn't we naturally, after finally the company blessed us with this big new toy that we had been begging for years, an online client? And so after over 3 years of embracing that newly obtained Master Duel audience, slowly transforming them into a Master Duel viewer base, it has cultivated, you guessed it, Master Duel viewers who want to watch Master Duel. So naturally, when someone like Sam does decide to do a one-off TCG video, it's not going to do as well numerically. That isn't because TCG is a worse game than Master Duel, or that Master Duel is stealing TCG viewers. It's just that this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that we as content creators have pigeonholed ourselves into. And for some reason, we've just ignored Jesse. You know, Jesse Cotton, the reigning world champion with almost 100,000 subscribers. And yes, while Jesse primarily does Master Duel content, there is plenty of TCG content on his channel that, numbers-wise, does fine. Overall, I think his content creation section is drawing too much of a false equivalence and is comparing casual Master Duel content with competitive TCG content. This is not a like-for-like comparison. Historically, casual content has always outperformed competitive content, even pre-Master Duel. Are we forgetting just how big Cyber Knight, Simply Unlucky, and Asian Eyes were back in the day? We used to have vines, sealed only, box openings, all of which dwarfed the competitive dueling book replays and profiles. Today, we still have skits that get millions of views and structure deck duels that can crack 6 digits. That's always been the nature of casual versus competitive. Of course, there isn't as much of it around as there used to be, but making that type of high-level content for TCG is a big demand on cost and logistics, compared to Master Duel. I'm not going to sit here and try and debate this. There is absolutely a hole and a niche to be filled for the TCG Yu-Gi-Oh content space, at least in terms of the numbers that perhaps the Wonky Quartet gets. We are just waiting for the next Table 500, the next Saga, Master Chef, Storage Wars, whatever it might be. TCG kind of needs its own thing, and I hope that someone fulfills that niche for you. The problem is that the current household names in Yu-Gi tubing aren't embracing TCG content and aren't tapping into it. And again, it's not enough to just make a one-off TCG video. It's about consistency.
To be clear, even if these trends continue, I don't think this is the end of TCG. A worst case scenario for me results in the TCG operating with the same legitimacy as Duel Links. A profitable enterprise just lucrative enough to sustain itself, but one which is also wholly ignored by the wider player base. Cottage industry for MetaFi Andes. So, who cares? If the worst comes to pass and paper events and products become totally infrequent, but digital's thriving, then what's the harm? After all, it's still Yu-Gi-Oh!
Is the billion-dollar company doing okay? Please don't be mean to the multi-million shareholders, MBT. Let's take a look at some numbers. On the Konami Group Corporation website, you can find the earnings releases of Konami, which are publicly available for all of their streams of revenue, from pachinko machines, even gyms and fitness centers, to, of course, digital systems. Now, I know it sounds weird, but just to clarify, digital systems does include the physical card game. I don't know why, but that is just the category that TCG, OCG, and Master Duel all come under. Taking a look at the pre-Master Duel numbers, we can see that Konami's operating profits in the fiscal year ending 2019 was 50 billion yen, down to 31 billion yen in the year ending 2020. Did something happen that year? Just for a completely random fun fact side note here, I think it's really interesting for some of you to see just how big Yu-Gi-Oh is in Japan specifically. 200 billion yen in revenue for just Japan compared to the EU and US numbers. Now, of course, be careful here because profit and revenue are not the same thing, but for some reason, the continents are subdivided under revenue and they don't give us the real numbers and split for profits by region. Now, if you compare that to 2025, which just ended, remember financial year ends in April, not December, the operating profits total for digital systems is just under 110 billion yen. That's about $670 million raw profit. That is like a 13-fold increase since 2019. So while much of this is probably attributable to Master Duel specifically, for me personally, I see this as a greater interconnected ecosystem of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think the TCG absolutely contributes to these numbers. Are we just not going to entertain the possibility that some new TCG players are here because of Master Duel?
If you haven't been paying attention to the price of product recently, it's not good. Individual cards can command triple digits of money for a playset, but the most recently released core set is rotting on the shelves for cost. Not MSRP, cost. Opening packs is quickly becoming a thing of the past. Why chase product to open if you're just occasionally going to show up to locals with a pet deck? The tack-on effects for OTSs are dire. They can't sustain a business with products rotting on the shelves.
This is such a good point. Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG product this year has been absolute garbage. It's not fun to open, it's uninteresting, there's nothing worth pulling, you can't draft it, and stores have been absolutely struggling to sell, which in the long term, with enough bad sets, there's no reason to stock Yu-Gi-Oh! And then the game dies. So my question here is, what does that have to do with Master Duel? TCG having poorly performing product is the fault of the TCG. And this is really what I see as such a poor scapegoat. Konami is the one who refuses to make sets draftable, create new and exciting rarities, release more all arts, or full arts, or make a new and an interesting promo card, or a million other reasons the community has given to why TCG product could potentially be interesting to open, and how to make it worth buying. So you're House of Champs, and from what I recall, you're a bit of an expert when it comes to product, correct?
I would say so. Over 20 years experience. I've played since LOB, opened my first ones at Borders, and I've been through pretty much all of it.
So very simply, what is it that makes a product do well, especially over the context of like the last 3 to 4 years? Like, how does a product sell well, and how is it good for a local game store?
So a product has to basically encompass the 3 major groups of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. It's the casual, the competitive, and the collector. It's kind of funny you say specifically the last 4 years, because we lost a lot of our collectors the moment they started rewaving a lot of these special Starlight rares in Quarter Century Secret Rare. You might say, oh, where they're just crying about... No, like, you imported Trishula as a special Starlight rare into a set, specifically put it in a set where it doesn't exist, to make the set better, and then they make a super easy access Trishula later that looks very, very comparable, and some people even think looks better for much cheaper. And so that kind of thing really drove away a ton of the collectors.
And do you think there's any connection between the performance of sets and Master Duel, or does it really all just boil down to competitive viability, staples, collector stuff
like the Exodia stuff that's actually being teched into competitive decks now with Sinjin and the Temple and that kind of stuff? It gets bought out by Master Duel players, unironically. Like that recent cup that had the Exodia stuff going on, right after that cup, it all moved on our market. So there is an actual transition from Master Duel gameplay in the casual market into our TCG market at times. But I wouldn't say that Master Duel on average is moving too many needles into our market. It's very rare.
Over the last few years, I have felt what I can only really describe as resentment, perhaps even jealousy by, I suppose, what I like to call TCG supremacists, taking every opportunity possible to bash and blame Master Duel for whatever goes wrong. These problems and issues that predate Master Duel. I'm not saying that's what MBT is doing here specifically. I just think that far too many people are going to latch onto this video and use it as some sort of justification for their frustrations, very real, genuine frustrations with the TCG, and try and scapegoat Master Duel. I think MBT made a good video in the sense that it is just this love letter to the TCG, an ode to a thing that made us who we are and where we are now today, especially as content creators. careers that we wouldn't have had without this game. So while the video does raise genuine, good, important points that I also want to see solved, I just think that in a period of panic and confusion, people want answers. People want to definitively say and blame something for why something is going wrong or not working. And in order to find those answers, I think we're trying to make connections and create associations when there aren't any.